named Ann Jennings. The Jennings family owned about 85% of what is Jennings State Forest was owned by the Jennings family or family members. So the first concept for me was a conservation. It started in 1895 with the Florida Federation of Women's Clubs, and the first women's club was actually the Village Improvement Association in Green Cove. So that started way back, first century, way back in the late 1800s. So they had an interest of developing, as these new towns were coming in, they wanted to start cleaning their cities up, putting in sidewalks, getting the roads sort of packed with good dirt, because they were real muddy. They wanted to conserve the birds and the forest, and they just wanted their places to look nice. So they had beautification programs. They organized forestry and bird clubs. But in 1901, William Sherman Jennings was elected governor of Florida. He is actually the last governor to be voted on by the legislation and not by voters. I guess at one time, the senators, representatives all met together. They chose some names out of the hat, and then they would vote on those that decided they would like to run for office, and it was done like in-house. He was the last governor elected that way. So he was in there from 1901 to 1905. While he was there, one of the things in his legislation he would like to have had was a state forestry board and a post of a state forester. But the legislation denied that request. They actually denied that request every year he was in office. So he never got to see it. When they left Tallahassee, he and May, they moved to Jacksonville, actually into the Springfield district of Jacksonville, where they had built a big house on what was Main Street then. They divided their time there from the city and from their farm and timber holdings here in Middleburg. So I believe their main house is right across from what was Middleburg High School. That house that sits in the corner, I think that was her house. And then they had the San Libreo Lumber Company, which is down off of 218. So they had all these holdings in play. There you go. So during the early part of the 1900s, the Florida Federation of Women's Clubs continued to push husbands, fathers, civic leaders, each legislation session. They were like, come on, we want improvements. The state's growing. More people are moving in. We need our communities, they need laws, they need regulations to keep for the citizens, so everybody's happy and knows what to do. But we gotta remember something at this time. Women could not vote. They wanted all these things, but they couldn't vote, so they're whispering to their husbands, they're going up to their fathers, and they were networking through tea parties to find out who was sort of inclined to do what they wanted, and they would broach that person and then find out who his friends were at maybe somebody else's house and have another tea party or a dinner, and they networked. These women networked to get what they wanted. So, when Governor Jennings in May she was elected president of the Federation of Women Club, 1915 through 1917. So she was there in 1914 and 15. The women's clubs had on their agenda to have the State Board of Forestry established, which failed in legislation, but they managed to secure funding and purchasing the Royal Palm State Park, which was the first state park in Florida and owned by a women's group. Pretty impressive. So now the women's clubs own the park. The 1915 legislation, though, didn't give them any money to run it. It gave them the park, 964 acres. May secured another additional 964 acres from Miss Flagler, who had property adjacent to it, so she donated it. They didn't have club monies to help run the park, So she started writing letters. She was a very prolific writer. Wanted to secure funds, so she wrote to every newspaper, organization, and individual she thought could be helpful in helping them. So she contacted John D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, Charles Deering, Thomas Edison. Thomas Edison, who was a winter resident, sent them $50. $50 was a lot of money then. Gradually, the small amounts came up, so they were able to get some things started for them. So as we said, Royal Palm was 960 acres. Another 960 came from Miss Flagler. And then they rented out that land from Miss Flagler's land to tomato farmers. So it helped offset and help brought in some money. And then eventually, later years, additional acreage was added. So eventually Royal Palm was 4,000 acres in size. And those women ran that park. They had trails built, which the trails that were built at Royal Palm were named for May. And they did quite a bit with there. So in 1919, May, with the help of her son Brian, who had just finished graduating from Stetson University, he had his law degree, they addressed this conference of Southern foresters in Jacksonville. And they all talked about this need for the Department of Natural Resources, Forestry Board, in coordination with other conservation programs. So May was appointed to this committee, and she was charged with setting up a citizen state forestry organization, even though there wasn't much time before the legislation session started. So the committee members got together, they wanted the forestry matters, and they decided to lobby for this establishment of the board. The legislation did adjourn, didn't even bother to meet with the group, was just not their thing. So May at this time was still a busy woman. She had plenty of other club duties. She was a state chairman for the Women's Liberty Loan Drive for Victory, which was at the end of World War I. And I have a list. She had her fingers in so many pies. It's unbelievable. We think we're stressed. I don't see how she did it. So at the start of 1920, May was actually the state chairman of the Women's Division of the Florida Educational Temperance Campaign. But she was also tending to her husband, who had been ill for several months. Governor Jennings passed away in February of 1920 in St. Augustine. So May pretty much went quiet. Probably that period of mourning, it very much expected in the 1920s. And about late 1920, early 1921, she started organizing again. She organized a Florida Legislation Council and would be their president for almost a decade. That council was a clearinghouse. So all of the state organizations like the Federation of the Women's Clubs, the Women League of Voters, Federation Business Professional Women's Club, Audubon Society, and the Florida Forest Association, which had been formed in 1921, all had ideas of what they wanted for laws and stuff to be formed. So they started pooling their stuff together. They would put things into the clearinghouse, and there were small committees in there, and the committees would work on everybody's ideas, but sometimes they had like ideas, so they would consolidate. So there was fewer things going up, instead of just this club sending this item up, even though it was duplicated. So they were consolidating things down. So they pushed the legislation for a bill to create fire districts down in the Everglades area. And then that following year, her son Brian ran for legislation. He was on a platform calling for the Forestry Board and tick eradication, because they were having a big problem with cattle tick. Soon after that, you could not export cattle out of Florida because of the ticks, because they would not dip them. That's where dipping came into later on. So, but he was defeated in the primary. 1923 brought us the Florida Forestry Association. Still not a legislation thing, but they did form an association. It was formed in Jacksonville. May was given special consultant. She was a charter member. Her son was a charter member and was the vice president. He would later become president. And B.F. Williamson was the first president. So this legislation council, they lobbied in Tallahassee. Again, 1925. This was their main purpose through a lot of this. They wanted to know the creation of the board for forestry. They added a state game and freshwater fish commission among its many interests. So the Game and Freshwater Fish Commission actually got through and was formed. So that means our current Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is 100 years old last year. So they wanted a park system, protection for the flowering trees, and a bill to supplement that 1921 fire district, the items. So, which was a county option law. That actually passed. So counties had the option to opt into some sort of fire protection. But the State Forestry Board, it passed. So from the inception of Florida Forest Association, they did work to establish local forest fire protection association in each county. These associations, they were non-governmental groups. They were landowners who banded together to protect their areas from wildfires and voluntary fight fires on their neighbor's property who may not be part of that group. They were basically your early volunteer firefighters. They also lobbied in favor of the Clark-McGarry Act, which Congress had passed in 1924. That helped set up a national and state cooperation in fire prevention, reforestation, stream flow maintenance, forestry tax laws, because at that time, everybody just cut trees. Nobody was replanting. Cattlemen, oh, my cattle need good grass to eat. Strike a match, let it go. And all they were doing was burning off every new seedling of that year. Fire would go across those pastures. Yeah, you had good grass, help get the ticks down, but it was killing all the young trees. So they literally were killing their crops. They were turpentining. Trees only have a shorter lifespan when you're turpentining, even in those days, and they were using cups and gutter. Cutting timber, things were made of wood, paper, houses, everything that was wood, but we weren't replenishing it. So that's what part of that Clark-McGarry Act was for, was to help with that. So Clay County had a cooperator group. One of the big cooperators was the Black Creek Fire Protection Association. And that was J.P. Hall, Penny Gwynn, and Jennings family, and there were a couple others. So that was in place. So in 1925, they did put together a pamphlet called Common Forest Trees of Florida. We have currently printed 26 editions of this book. That's that little green tree ID book everybody loves. Now it's only available online. They print very few of them anymore. And they weren't updating it the last time I looked. So
Is that the one on top?
yes, the brown book on top is the original first edition. The 6th, 9th, and 19th edition, I actually have. And I did not realize what the first one looked like until I Googled it, and it came out. It's like, well, no wonder I haven't found one. So, but I have had my eye on the 2nd and 3rd editions too, and I've not been able to get them readily available. It's whatever eBay pops up for me. So in 1927, the Florida Forestry Association was back with the Florida Lumber, Millwork, the Women's Clubs, the Gardens Clubs, Audubon Society, State Chamber of Commerce, and individuals such as Ben Wan of the Southern Lumber Journal. So they presented this very good, comprehensive bill. They wanted that forestry board, and they were pulling out all guns this time. And they lobbied hard. They knew the cattlemen did not want this bill, and that was part of the problem. They didn't want it, so what they did is, instead of one big bill to cover protection, fire protection, and conservation, they split the bill in two. So part of the bill was to cover forest protection, and the other one was for fire protection. So that way, when it was presented to the legislation, it would go to a committee. Well, when it got to that appropriation committee, there was a few little hard-headed men in there. He basically stuck it under the pile, and there it sat. The young lady who was helping May pushed this through, because May was out of town for some reason at this time. And she was getting, the lady who was pushing it wasn't as aggressive as May was. So the committee chair, he started misrepresenting the bill to the committee. So they killed it in committee. When May found out, that lady was not happy. She and her group, with a truck they borrowed from George Pratt, who was the president of the American Forestry Association, they had a moving picture that the federal government had produced that showed the effects of wildfire and the devastation it caused. They put that truck with a movie projector, a movie screen, and they hauled it around the state of Florida, showing free movie to all these little towns, all up and down what is today's 301, 17, from the Panhandle to the south. They were showing this movie everywhere in a very short period of time. So they moved it around, they showed them what was happening to the land in Florida. That bill that committee turned down, well, when it got to the legislation, it got voted on, and it actually passed this time with 2/3 of the legislation voting for it. So we now have formed a Department of Forestry. But we haven't formed an agency yet, just the department. So John Martin was the governor that year, and he appointed Brian Jennings in December 13th to the newly created Board of Forestry. He sat on that board for 10 years. That board established the reforestation programs, worked to prevent forest fires, they enforced wildfire legislation, they worked with civics groups to publicize the work of foresters, what they actually were doing. And they organized the Florida Forest Service. So April 2nd of 1928, eventually, is when they signed the bill and the law that made my current agency. So we will be 100 years old in 2 years. And they also helped to establish state parks, because the state parks fell under the Board of Forestry for a number of years until almost 1940s, when they separated the two organizations into individuals. So our first state forester was appointed in 1928, and that was Harry L. Baker. He was given a big budget that year, $12,500 for the entire state. It's a lot of money in those days, but yeah, but it's a drop in the bucket barely today. So he started a forestry program, and we get back to when we talk about Black Creek Fire Protection Association. They were the first association in the state here in Clay County to sign as a cooperator group with the state of Florida. They were the first ones. So when you have a cooperator group, they have to have a minimum of 60,000 acres to be a cooperator. And that can be multiple landowners as a part. And what they do is they pledge to help do fire line plowing, reforestation, and they help to set phone lines and stuff to connect the fire towers that were being built at that time. Because it became part of the Clarkwood Area Act. What it is the The federal government was giving 3 cents per acre. The state chipped in 3 cents per acre, and the landowner only had to come up with 4 cents per acre. And what they would do on their cooperators, somewhere on it, they would build a house and allow a tower, a fire tower, to be installed on the property to help look for wildfires. And it could have been an extremely tall tree with little steps and a platform.
A tree house.
Basically a overgrown tree house, a steel tower. Some of them were telephone poles or cable poles that would go straight up with a crow's nest. And some really old pictures, just a few of them. So, in the picture up there, that tower right there is the 4th oldest tower in the state. It was built and completed by the end of February of 1929. It is in our county.
Is that the one on 17?
It's on 16.
It's on 16. The
Yeah,
one
it's
on
on
17 is gone.
Okay.
It actually came well after that. The one in 17 didn't come until the 1950s. So that was the 4th one. They consider it the 3rd oldest because one of the first 3 towers was turned over to the federal government, because soon as they started building the first 3 towers, that's when Lusty and Osceola National Forest were formed. So the tower fell on their property, so they had turned it over to them. So that is the 3rd oldest, and it was completed just before this big review. This Forestry Association was giving a big field trip, and it was on the 29th of February, which was a leap year. And they were going to come down, they were gonna tour through Penny Farms, then they were gonna go up this modern, brand new fire tower and all its little things that it had going for it, all this first-rate forestry firefighting equipment. When they left there, they were going to the Rayford, to the prison farm, which is over in Rayford, because they had a turpentine distillery over there before it went up to Lusty. So they were making a nice big loop of looking at all the new things that was coming in, all the modernization. So they started with, 700,000 acres in the northern part of the state. By this point, we're starting to go under protection. That's a big chunk of property. They got a seedling nursery started. They were working and improving the naval stores industry. And then with all her leadership, her lobbying, publicity work, Mae Jennings is known to, even to this day, as the mother of the Florida Forest Service. So, the red dot on that map, if you noticed, that's the Camphor Farm, which was part of the Penny Gwen property, but it was DuPont that I think owned part of it there near Waller. That's at the that's what is Satsuma Track and Camp Blanding on the south side of 16. The little red dot, that's about where that tower is at. That is the house that was built in. And that was a shock to me, because I live in that house. It was unbeknownst to any of us, it was as old as it was. We were thinking 1950s. No, we were way, way off the mark.
So what is at the Camphor Farm now?
It is the Satsuma Tract of Middleburg State Forest. It is planted pine. It was owned, used to be Gilman Paper Company. So it is slowly, anything that's got planted pines, we slowly convert to a more natural look. It just takes time, because we will harvest the trees. It provides income back to the state, which helps support the Florida Forest Service. We're required to earn and make about $7 million a year to go back into the internal trust fund, and then we receive back.
Are there wild campers still out there?
Yes, my yard says there is. But the big freezes of the 80s killed a lot of them. The last of them that had never been harvested, because they grew camphor for making gunpowder. But right about the end of World War I is when they found they could make gunpowder more synthetically using a different method than camphor trees. And so needless to say, camphor cost went down in the toilet. That was it. And they just left the trees. And over time, they have died off. They're considered an invasive species. We control them with the lawnmower. Frost does take them out when it's a hard enough freeze. But yeah, there's still one good tree there, but it literally has come back from the roots to even be a tree now. But I still have stumps scattered through the yard, cause the whole yard used to be camphor. So there was some surprises. We uncovered either a cesspool pit of some sort in front of the house accidentally. It's surprising when you step down and all of a sudden you're like sitting on the ground and it's like, where's my leg? I went through a piece of tin roofing that was buried in the soil. It was just soft and there was this dang little gophers, you know, kicking the dirt, trying to, the next thing I know, I go, boom.
Oh my God.
I got curious. I started digging.
Yeah.
I went down 6 feet, cleared everything out, 6 feet down. It was a beautiful lined well, but it was not mortared. So it was designed to drain. So I think it was an early outhouse. Who knows what it was, but it would not hold water. And it's since been covered back in, and now there's a flower bed on top of it. But it was like, okay. It was a surprise to all of us when that appeared about 4 years ago.
6 feet deep, that's pretty substantial.
And then we still didn't even get to bottom.
Wow.
I filled it up with the garden hose as fast as I could, and it would come up, and then it would drain down. It was like, so I just filled it in with sand, dirt, put the tin back in there, and just kept covering. It still needs more dirt. But yes, it was quite an experience to be on the ground. All right, one more. So in 1929, Miss May was actually awarded an honorary doctorate or Doctor of Laws for all the work she's done, all her civic work, her political work, all her worthy causes. So the letter in the photo up there was from the Stetson Dean, and he was inquiring to her regarding her cap and gown and her doctorate hood, because he had not heard anything back. Well, he had sent the letter to her son. It's like, why didn't you send it to her directly? You know, he sent it to his son. And he just like, whatever. So May had to write back, giving her the size and everything, you know, all the little things that they needed. She did write back. So when they awarded her her honor, the president of Stetson said that he was conferring the degree for distinguished service to Florida upon one who had doctored more laws than anyone in the state. Because at this time, we're talking 1929, she had been helping to write and doctor laws since 1906. That was after her husband left the governorship. Now this woman was the daughter of a senator and lawyer, was married to a lawyer and governor. She knew the ins and outs of Tallahassee, even before she became a governor's wife. She knew how to work the politics. So she became an honorary lawyer. She got her doctorate. And you think about it, 1929, women had only been voting for about 9 years, if even that long. And she was a trailblazer. So in 1935, the legislation did pass some more special laws. They wanted to get countywide organized fire prevention and control. So what that meant was the cooperators, if the county had enough cooperators to exceed a certain percentage of the county's land, they automatically could be, with their commissioners saying yes, they would like to do this, have the cooperators turned over to the state, and then the state would run the fire prevention and the fire control versus the volunteers. So it became a paid type of thing. So Clay County did not get this done until they voted on it in 1948. And in 49, it was voted on. 1950, they started with a borrowed tractor from Duval and a group of men out at the Satsuma Tower, and the rest is history. Duval County was the first county in 1937 to be organized for state control. But it took up until, I think I have it here, into almost the 1960s before the last county finally came under state control.
How did depression affect their funds for this?
It actually didn't affect it too bad because in the Depression, we had the CCs. Well, the Florida Forest Service was in charge of the CC programs in the state of Florida. Most people did not realize that because they had their own form of government, but it was the Florida Forest Service who determined where camps were going to go and the projects they were going to do. The CCs helped to build many a fire tower on cooperator properties. They helped with reforestation and replanting a lot of Osceola, Lusty areas. They also helped to build the brand new turpentine still over at Lusty, a big federal government distillery. They helped to string electric lines, phone lines, because the towers communicated by phone. We didn't have radio yet. So they were stringing rangers from the cooperators and the CCs. They were stringing phone lines from tower to tower, while the communities in between were starting to also get it. So they were road building. The CCs did far more work in state parks and state forests than people even realize. They helped to create changes in communities because they started to help to link communities together. Instead of, just a railroad here, slow mail, they were putting in the phone lines. They were helping to modernize our communities. So some of our good prominent cooperators was Union Rag Paper Company, Foremost Properties, which was the Penny Farms, Quinlan, he was known as Foremost Farms later on, St. Mary's Craft Corporation, Frank Williams, Sheriff Hall, Canal Timber, and of course May's Son, and A.S. Moore. So there were a lot of big time players from Clay County involved in cooperating in pushing for the Florida Forest Service. You look at old Clay County Crescent records, some of the old newspapers, you can see the ads in the paper, join the association, telling people what the association was about, and trying to get people to understand we needed this to be able to join at the state level to protect the entire county, and not just cooperators and whoever was closest to cooperators. So you had cooperators up around the Camp Landing area, you had a few in the south section of Green Cove, and then a few up in the Middleburg Orange Park area. But here they were talking about going in countywide to protect even the little landowner. Somebody had only a 5-acre farm, not just the cattlemen that had a couple thousand acres. It was for everyone. So in 1969, we did go through a Government Reorganization Act. They took programs and functions from the Board of Forestry and moved them under the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. And they took those functions that were assigned to the Florida Forest Service and put them also in that department. Board of Forestry was renamed to the Forestry Advisory Council, and it went from a policy making to an advisory. The director of the Florida Forest Service and Commissioner of Agriculture, and this is when we became known as the Division of Forestry. So we became a division under the Department of Ag. Then in 2011, they decided, hey, let's put them back to their old name. So we're still in the Department of Agriculture, but we took back our former name that we were graced with back in 1928. So by 1972, all the Florida counties were under fire control. So that took from 1937 to 1972. That's almost 40 years to get 67 counties in fire protection. We added a Florida Preservation 2000 fund that started in 1990. That started purchasing our public lands. At that point, they had only had Cary State Forest, which was the first state forest. Pine Log, or is it Pine Log? Pine Log and Cary are about the same age. Then you know, they added with Lakuchi, which was federal property, they bought it on a lease program. Then they started Blackwater, and then there was nothing for a long time. Preservation 2000, Save Our Rivers, that's what helped bought Jennings State Forest with the first piece in 1990. And we got our last piece like in 2011. So we went from 1,900 and some acres with the first few purchases to now just over 25,000. We contain 38 state forests and 1 state ranch today. We manage almost 1.2 million acres. We help with landowner assistance, environmental education, and as many programs as people seem to throw at us, we deal with what we can. We help with hurricane recovery. We help with eradication for the snails, the African giant land snail. We were down there helping to clean them up. We helped with mouse eradication from the sugarcane fields, medfly, going around baiting and putting out traps for medfly, helping plant industry. We helped a lot of our sister organizations learn about our incident command system, something we use, and every time we go in to help with an incident, we set up a command and we're teaching others. So that is something that National Wildlife folks use, U.S. Forest Service and that. We use it, and we've been helping communities to learn to use it. That we do training classes for 130, 190, the fire departments join in, and they keep their skills up to date and learn the difference between structure and wildland. It is fought differently. So, that is a picture of May. That was during a service for a ship that was named in her husband's honor. It was a small cruiser type, and it was named for him. So that was the ceremony from that picture. But that is her obituary. She actually died on the eve of her 91st birthday. And I understood she actually had cancer. And she was buried at Evergreen Cemetery in Jacksonville. She only had 1 child, and that was Brian Sherman Jennings. They had 3 grandchildren. Lila Mae Odom, who's still living. No, wait a minute. No, her daughter's Linda. Miss Linda. Dorothy Sandridge, and her twin was Brian Sherman's Jr. And Brian, I have in here, was married to Martha. He actually was, Martha was the second wife. He had a first wife. He never had children. His name is well known throughout the Orange Park area. He was on the board of directors for the Bank of Orange Park. He is the one who started cable TV in Clay County. He funded that and started that program, which later became Comcast and all that. So yes, he has a school that was named for him, and like she was telling us earlier, you can see the Jennings name pop up in lots of places.
Miss Dorothy, is that Dottie's baby?
Yes,
Yes, that's Dottie.
that was,
I met her.
yeah, she was a sweet lady.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we knew, my grandmother was good friends with Dorothy, her mother, Jennings.
Yeah.
And so I used to go with them, I'd go over with my grandmother to the house on the farm across the
Mhm. Yeah, and it was interesting when you look at all the family names, the children are literally named for their parents. It was like Dorothy was named for Dorothy. The middle name might change, but it's like the first names just kept going through. This is got to be confusing.
That's why everybody went by Bubba and Sissy.
Be quiet.
That's a southern thing.
It's a southern thing. So, now we know May and your family, they had very strong ties here in Clay County, Duval, and they did leave us a legacy. They left us a legacy to use and enjoy, and that is Jennings State Forest. It is managed by the Florida Forest Service with our cooperator, Fish and Wildlife. The majority of the land that the State Forest purchased from the Jennings family members was all part of their, one time part of the farm, the Artesian Farm and Land Company, and the San Labreo Timber Company that William, May, and Brian Sr. had formed. But who would have thought? 130 years ago, a concept from a group of women, and and some like-minded men to conserve, promote the idea of a board of forestry would be flourishing today, that one woman in her family would actively write bills, campaign for more than 2 decades to form 3 state agencies and promote conservation issues. She was an activist. She chaired or served on boards for many organizations throughout her life, and many of them at the same time. Women like her, fought for the better quality of life for the state, for its visitors. Then on January 15th of last year, she was inducted into the Florida Women's Hall of Fame, and which is a fitting tribute to an outstanding woman. Now, when we named Jennings State Forest, we did not know this history, so we named it for the governor.
The governor.
Prominent man, name it for the governor. If we had known what we knew then, it would have been named for May, because she was the one that was really the shaker and the maker in that family. Her grandson, Sherman Jr., was probably right up there with her. I mean, different things I have read that I've been able to find in newspaper clippings and articles. He was just as involved in Clay County in the politics and everything.
We did research for the S. Jennings 20th anniversary thing. I read an article where it was the Jennings family at one time were the largest family landowners in the state of Florida. At one time.
That's because they owned some property in Jacksonville, which was just the house and just a little bit there. They had like 60,000 acres here in Clay County. But they also owned property in South Florida, which that 4,000 acres of Boros Pond Park, part of that acreage was what May and William owned down there near the park that they had for a part of their winter home when they would go down there to visit. They had a mansion out there on the water. When May was actually on the committees to form the Florida Everglades as a national park. Royal Palm State Park, because you do not hear about it today, it was one of the first parts of the Florida Everglades. It actually sits in the upper corner, and she donated her property at the time when the Everglades was being formed to help enhance that. And several other landowners in the area did the same thing. So we didn't even talk about this. This woman did so much, and there's irony to the whole story. Her and her husband specifically, while he was governor, they were buying, the Everglades was being bought out and they were starting to dredge and draining it. He was on the committees to help drain the Everglades. Who would have thought she would be the biggest conservationist? She was ahead of Marjorie Call, or Marjorie Wallens. She was doing it before Marjorie. She did not know much about Audubon Society until she was talking to them. In her 1901, in her dress for the inauguration, you see the bird plumes in her hair. She stopped doing that. And matter of fact, she mailed them back to the company she had got them from. Afterwards, she stopped buying them, and she was heavily involved in the Audubon Society. Matter of fact, I found this. I found a biography and had some dates in here. She was the charter member and president of the Florida Historical Society. She was a charter member of the Audubon Society in Florida. She was a member of Executive Committee, State Audubon, State Anti-Tuberculosis Association Director, organized Duval County Law Enforcement League, the only woman member for a forum committee for the Jacksonville Chamber of Commerce, and that was in 1922-23. I mean, these are early dates. Charter member, director for the Florida State Historical Society, charter member of Florida Forestry Association, charter member of the Springfield Garden Club, still around today. she just had so many, I found something that I was sharing with Josephine is, she served in the Catherine Livingston chapter of the Daughters of American Revolution, which is the Jacksonville chapter of DAR. She was a vice regent. She was also a state chairman for DAR on Old Trail Roads and state chair of one of their library committees. It's like so much little bits of history. And every time I do a little more, what else have I seen? More things come online. I keep finding more and more. It's just hard to keep, and this only goes up to like 1924. And most of the things they have on her are digitized to about 1930. After that, I don't get as much as digitized. But yeah, I did find some beautification, Jacksonville beautification. She started it.
I'm curious about, because she was so prominent a leader in history, you know, what happened to her house in Jacksonville? I know what's happened to the one out here, and it breaks my heart.
I wanna say the one in Springfield after she died, my understanding is they moved the main street, basically. And it was gonna change the addresses on that street, and she got mad with the post office. And she point blank told them, her address, this house has been her address ever since she's lived here, and she's not changing it. So,
She can get mail.
no, she got mail, but she refused to change the address, so the number was off kiltered for the rest of the street, because she refused to change it. So it was one of those things, the mailman knew.
Yeah.
And when she died, I believe the house has been torn down,
Oh,
and because the street was shifted.
yeah.
A lot of
So,
the old homes in that
And you
area.
see the one out here, I mean, the family,
Well, the Sand Ridge, which was, Gordon Sandridge married Dottie.
Dottie Jennings.
So Sandy actually moved out west.
He's in,
Washington
Washington State.
Sandy passed away.
Did he?
He passed away last
He
year.
wasn't that old.
He
was
wasn't,
in
no,
his
he's in
60s.
his, how old?
That's not
He was in
old.
his 60s.
60s.
He was older than I was,
Yeah.
and I'm 61.
I knew Sandy,
He was
yeah.
young. Yeah, he was a real young guy.
he, from what Linda has told me, you know, he pretty much inherited from Dottie.
Yeah,
And so, and he did offer the rest of the family to buy the house.
yeah. He
But they
was not
couldn't
gonna come
afford
back.
it.
Yeah, he was not gonna come back.
Oh, no, he did not come back.
No,
And
but
so,
he did pass away, so his son,
did he?
his one child, took out everything. And that could be why so much of that property got sold,
Right, it
because
just
of the
got sold.
taxes.
Yeah, the taxes, and you know, that's where Branning, the Branning property was, where in the cemeteries there where Jennings Farm is.
Yeah,
And,
like we need another subdivision.
yeah, tell me about it, go down
Oh,
20, just right down 23 and you'll see the
And you'll-
dust.
You'll see all the
dust out
infrastructure
there,
for these
nothing,
homes to
but
be built.
infrastructure in the bottom, but no houses yet, but
Well,
yeah.
what's really neat
Yeah.
about that house over there across from Middleburg High is the back, and they had that old timey sleeping porches where when it got
Yeah.
hot,
Mhm.
you'd sleep out on the porch. It was the neatest house.
And it could have been put on the, state,
Historical register.
yeah, the historical state registry,
Yeah,
but,
because that house would have been built early 1900s, so the house
Yeah.
itself is probably right at 100 years old.
yeah, but now the thing that, our former curator, Dr. Cynthia Stone said was, it had been modified so much that it would not qualify, it wouldn't meet, and that's sad too. Anyway, I just,
So that goes with many older
oh
homes.
yeah, that's true,
You know, you try to modernize them and bring them up to fit today's family and
Right.
family styles.
where is
You're going-
Joanna Gaines when you need, but anyway, we don't have those kind of people, you know, the restoration, and you can modernize and,
Yeah.
to a
Well,
point.
restoration is expensive. I
Oh,
live in a
yes.
house that's almost 100 years old.
Yeah,
We're having plumbing issues now,
right,
and I think I know what it is, but it's trying to find a plumber, one.
sure that knows.
Trying to
And then-
find,
Meet codes now. You have a problem with that sometimes.
oh, we meet codes for some things, but it's interesting when you add a central heat and air,
Oh, yes.
and they're drilling holes upstairs, and they're like, their drill bits almost do not go all the way through, and when they first come in, I look at them, when I say it is a true 2x4, I mean it's a true 2x4.
Yeah.
And it's like, and you smell the pine pitch as they're drilling through it.
When
We
they
have
have
chunks of wood.
the timber build a business there, landing right across from, Middleburg High. We used to own a house